Now to a WSAZ investigation. In the past few weeks, we have told you about shootings, deaths, and arrests involving suspects with connections to Detroit.
It is an ongoing problem. We sent News Channel 3's Dan Griffin to Detroit, right into the neighborhoods that are exporting crime into our hometowns. And he is just back. Dan, you rode along with people who are a part of the fight there to disrupt this Detroit connection.
Well, that's right, Amanda. And we learned a lot when we got ready for our ride along with the Detroit Crime Commission. We were told to be ready to run at any moment. They encouraged us to leave our big camera behind. As usual, they packed guns and ammo. Then we headed for the 7- and 8-mile neighborhoods to see where a lot of this crime comes from.
Drugs, gangs.
Welcome to the Red Zone, nicknamed for blood.
Blights, reduced economic activity.
This area covers several blocks outside downtown Detroit. We went on a ride to this neighborhood scarred with graffiti, burned homes, trash, crime, and an inescapable feeling of despair.
The Red Zone is an area that is home to probably a number of different gangs, but the one in particular that we are interested in is called 7 Mile Bloods.
We recognize that gang name, and you may have too. Charleston police arrested 4 members of the 7 Mile Bloods of Detroit last week in connection with 2 shootings on the west side just hours apart. Tymel McKinney, 18 years old, was killed.
This was a group that appears to be very prone to violence.
Police say Daryl Carter Jr. hired a hit on a Charleston police lieutenant. Carter said his orders came from a Detroit gang boss. That's no surprise to Andy Arena of the Detroit Crime Commission. He's a former FBI agent. Commissioners told us fighting those threats is key.
When you get to the point where gangs can threaten law enforcement without any repercussions, then you've lost the war.
Arena showed us what the war looks like. In the Red Zone, we found shrines to dead children and gang members on utility poles. And we learned how the problems here spread to our region.
This is a hub. This is, supply and demand is set up here in Huntington. They can purchase heroin cheap and almost double, if not make more than double their money here in the Huntington area.
I'm told very little crime actually happens downtown. Much of it happens in outlying areas like this one here and extends beyond there to states like West Virginia. We wanted to know how the drug trade connects to us. Arena says it's all about finding fertile ground. Drug dealers are sent from the Motor City down highways like Interstate 75 and US 23 in Ohio. From there, criminals set up shop in many small cities.
Lima, Ohio, Chillicothe, into West Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky.
That means a steady pipeline of drugs to Huntington and Charleston.
Flashing gang signs, you see that?
And crime from Detroit on our streets.
We make a connection to these other areas, get an understanding of the current drug trade, and in knowing that the prices are set by supply and demand. If the supply is small, and the demand is high, the prices are going to be high. So once they make a determination that there is a potential market that's lucrative, then they'll send down some enterprising members.
Arena says it's convenient for low-level members to set up shop back in our region. There's little competition and the return on investment is high.
You can take a pill that's, you can get $10 for here, take it down there and get $40 or $50. The same thing with heroin.
They say some dealers will stay for days, others for months, and many come back. Arena told me the police need help if we want to disrupt the Detroit connection.
You got to keep the pressure on. You got to keep them out. You've got to make sure that it's not a friendly place for these people to come.
That means educating landlords in our region on what to look for when criminals come to rent, protecting our schools and children who could be recruited into gangs, and reporting tips to police. Now, Andy Arena also told us in his experience, it's no surprise for investigators to get calls from law enforcement in Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia dealing with crimes linked to Detroit. Just last night, we met up with West Virginia State Police, who brought in another dealer on one of their own trips to Detroit. They say he was involved in a major heroin bust at a motel in Cabell County last month.
All right, Dan, thanks. Great story. The Detroit Connection, of course, is not a new story in our region. 9 years ago, a crew from WSAZ made the trip to Michigan. Just like today, police in both Detroit and our region truly have their hands full.
Yeah, back then we wanted to get a look at the problem from the inside out as well. And the Detroit Public Safety Department's gang squad chief told us he had to really stay on top of things to battle the technical and very organized street gangs that were making a ton of money exporting drugs and crime to places like Huntington and Charleston and Portsmouth. He said the gang lords had found a perfect spot because they could charge a higher price for their drugs on our streets, and while their lieutenants were here, they could stock up on the plentiful supply of guns in Appalachia. Then they'd turn the guns over to their new young recruits.
They'll trade drugs for weapons, and the money's flowing good.
Tech 9 from out of a 14-year-old boy's hand.
They bring these middle school kids into the fold of drug activity because they understand what the laws are as it pertains to juveniles, where a juvenile is usually going to be hit with a much lighter punishment.
Now, at the time, most of the Detroit Connection was centered around activity in Huntington, but we know how that has changed. The homicide rate is obviously a big part of the drug trade, too. From 2005, when we first reported from Detroit, until today, the murder rate has remained steady, actually dipping a bit. But the thing to remember is the overall population of the city of Detroit has declined rapidly with the auto industry, so the rate per 100,000 people is actually higher, and Detroit's overall crime rate is much higher than the national average. For example, it had the same number of murders as New York, a city with 11 times the population.